Thank you, Matt. And in other news, Interior's Inspector General says a sole source contract for the management of CNMI ARRA funds violates CNMI law. OIG says a nearly $400,000 contract awarded to Integrated Professional Solutions, or IPS, appears to have violated both CNMI procurement law and ethics rules. IPS was started by former Secretary of Commerce Michael Atta just days after he resigned from his government post last October. While at Commerce, Atta was managing ARRA funds on behalf of the CNMI and brokered a deal where the work could be done through his private company. A sole source contract was then awarded to him in part because of his experience in managing ARRA money. According to CNMI procurement rules, Atta should have been barred from engaging in the contract.
If I tell you I was not, most people aren't going to believe it, right? Because I should have been aware. I never received any ethics training, any of that. Now, that doesn't excuse me from not knowing about it, all right? I truthfully did not know about it.
Attorney General Ed Buckingham, who reviewed the deal, would not comment specifically on the report, but does say this.
There were ethical issues present that I was aware of at the time that I was reviewing and authorizing the contract, and I balanced the ethical concerns with the need for the Commonwealth to have this review done.
Buckingham goes on to say that the administration had checked with the Office of the Public Auditor.
We looked at this, and this was a factor. Now, in the OPA letter, there's no reference to ethical issues. I mean, we saw those. OPA didn't raise those. OPA said, well, we do want to be careful not to comment specifically on a contract because we may be called upon to review it later, which makes sense. But then they said, you know, the validity depends on the specific amount of the contract, the duration, and rate of compensation. Nothing in here identified any ethical issues at the time.
OPA said at the time that because they handle procurement appeals, it would have been inappropriate for them to issue an opinion. But why couldn't the Attorney General's office have reviewed the contract and said there are ethical issues and for that reason this contract is not legally sufficient?
Because part of my job is not to be a purist. Part of what I have to do is review all the contracts that are coming through the Commonwealth, and contracts aren't perfect. I mean, we get hundreds of contracts that come through here. And if I rejected every contract that had issues, whether ethical or legal, the business of the Commonwealth would stop. So, what I did is I made a very conscious decision, which I still stand behind, which is to say I recognize the ethical issues. Those are present. I also look at the need for continuity, the lack of capacity on the Department of Commerce, and I balance those.
But isn't your role as the Attorney General to ensure that CNMI law is followed and to review contracts to ensure that they comply with CNMI law, including the ethics law?
Absolutely.
So how does that serve the Commonwealth?
It serves the Commonwealth in this case because I made the balanced decision that I did. And as I said, I stand behind that.
The terms of ARRA grants require that contracts comply with local laws and regulations. Sources familiar with the case say that the CNMI may now be at risk of losing federal grants or paying the federal government back for what has been spent. According to Buckingham, as of today, IPS still has a contract with the CNMI government.